What if the quality of your life, your relationships, your career, even your creativity depended not on the answers you give, but on the questions you ask? Well, listen, today we're diving into the underrated superpower that can change the way you think, connect, and lead. We're talking about asking better questions. Come on, let's get into it. Welcome to Transformation Station, the show where we explore the stories and strategies that help us to live, think, and create with more intention. I'm your host, Adrienne Benson, and today we're tackling a skill that sounds simple, but few of us truly master. We're talking about, that's right, the art of asking questions. And whether you're a leader, a parent, a creative, or just someone trying to have a more meaningful conversation, the way you shape questions, it kind of helps us to form deeper connections. Well, listen, today I have an amazing guest. Her name is Kristan Swan, and she's experienced and has years of studying what makes questions powerful. Together, we're going to unpack what separates a shallow question from one that sparks true trust, insight, and transformation. Let me tell you a little bit about Kristan. Well, she excels in leadership, training, group moderation, writing, design, interviewing, and research. And after a career in landscape design, Kristan focused on business coaching. Recognizing the challenges of founder syndrome and high burnout rates for professional service business owners, she developed the four S's of success: structure, system, strategy, and space. And listen, today we are absolutely thrilled. Kristan, welcome to Transformation Station. We're so glad that you're with us today.
Oh gosh, Adrienne, thank you so much. I have been looking forward to this conversation because, as I related to you, this is one of my favorite topics and something that I feel is applicable to pretty much all areas of our lives. And I mean, I myself, right, am always growing and improving in this area. So this is something I think about all the time, asking
Oh,
better questions.
this is going to be really good. So listen, let's start with this. All right. I'm sure most of us have probably been asked hundreds, maybe even thousands of questions throughout our careers, right? We're talking to business leaders right now. Some of the questions we were asked, Kristan, were thoughtful. Some were routine. Maybe even there could have been some questions from time to time that we said, "Oh, wow, that's a really good question." So, Kristan, I know that
Yeah.
you spent time studying, you spent time practicing the art of asking questions. What, in your view, actually makes a good one?
Well, I think that it really starts with a, a couple of things. So, recognizing that when we are communicating with each other, it is what we're actually saying, the words that are coming out of our mouth are just a small portion of what we are communicating overall. Right.
Mm,
So it's also our tone, our body language. It depending on kind of culturally, it can be eye contact or no eye contact.
mm,
So it's we have there's a lot going into communication just in general. So I think that that's a good place to recognize. And I think that we are, it's so funny because I do this and I have to, and I catch myself because I think about this stuff all the time. But I think one of the things that is so important about asking a good question is being truly interested in the response,
mm,
right? And so it's not that there is this set of amazing questions, right? It's so much more about how present are you
mm,
for the response? Because I
mm,
think that we can all relate to being asked a question and really feeling like the asker is either already leaping ahead to what they're going to ask next, or what they want to add to the conversation, or that they just are frankly not interested in they're kind of asking the question out of a kind of a perfunctory social, kind of engagement thing. They're not really curious.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
No,
I mean,
mhm.
well,
Yep.
because I'm just even thinking like a very benign question that we probably say way too much is, how are you? Right. And so many times, really, people are just asking, they're using how are you, like, hey, how are you, as just a greeting. They're not really asking the question, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Versus someone that, I mean, when a friend sits across from you and is focused solely on you and saying, how are you? What's going on?
Mm-hmm. That
Yeah,
makes such a big difference.
it makes a world of difference. And I think in terms of, I mean, if you have the ability, in a leadership situation, I just had this. I was working with a new colleague yesterday,
Mm-hmm.
and so it was a great opportunity for me to set the stage and say, I want to open this. We are new working together. Having been a solopreneur for most of my life, a lot of, as much as I try to put things down in handbooks or in some sort of written form, I mean, so much of what I do is in my head. So
Mm-hmm.
I want to. I'm doing a couple of things. I'm leading with some vulnerability here because I'm basically saying I know that there's stuff that hasn't gotten put down on paper that still is swimming around in my head, and I forget sometimes to be doing that. So I'm kind of showing my hand that I'm not doing things perfectly, and then from there I'm saying, so to piggyback on the fact that I know I have these blind spots,
Mm-hmm.
there are, please ask questions, and feel free to ask a question multiple times, because we are, especially if we, and what was nice in that exchange that I just had recently is my colleague was able to also kind of match my vulnerability and say, thank you so much for sharing that, because I'm a little nervous.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, I was also able just to reiterate, ask questions multiple times. It doesn't, I'm not going to take it personally, because I know if I've got any anxiety, that is, I may not hear, I can, I cannot hear the answer, or I cannot remember things as well as when I'm a little bit more relaxed. So
Mm-hmm.
just, I think that there's a lot that goes on in this realm of question asking. But I think as leaders, if you have the opportunity,
Mm-hmm.
you can kind of set the stage for the ability to recognize that there are no dumb questions, there are no stupid questions, there are no, be asking a question multiple times,
Mm-hmm.
or not understanding the response and asking a follow-up question. That shows real curiosity, instead
Mm-hmm.
of, that doesn't show a lack of competency.
I love that. I love that. And as I hear you talking, right, from a leadership perspective, I think of this from a leadership principle. Great leaders know that questions build trust while answers build authority, right? So we want to ask
Mm-hmm.
questions that, like you mentioned in your illustration, that shows our team you're listening, you see them, you value their perspective, you want
Yes.
to know what they know. That then builds trust, that builds creativity, innovation, team responsibility, team shared responsibility. And I also thought about this while you were talking. A good question isn't about getting the right answer, it's about creating the right
Mm.
conversation, right? I heard you
Oh, I
use
love that.
words that reminds me, when we ask questions, you mentioned tone, which is when you said that, I said, oh yes, right? Well, like, how, you can ask a question, what are you doing over there? What are you doing? Right? I mean, that your tone lightens it. Your tone says control. Your tone makes me feel nervous. Your tone makes me feel
Mhm.
peaceful or open, right? So definitely the tone, right? Asking please or why, or asking a question that is grounded in curiosity, that causes
Mhm.
the individual to feel like, oh, I have something of value that I can share back. Now, my second question, you started to touch on it a little bit, right? You mentioned the word stupid, right? And the reason why I'm bringing that up is because even leaders, and we're talking in this community to many people who have been leading for generally about 10 to 25 years, right? But it doesn't matter how long you've been in leadership, many of us still fear asking stupid questions, right? And so I want to
Right.
ask you, Kristan, how can we overcome that fear and shift our mindset to see the curiosity of questions as a strength rather than a weakness?
Yeah, that is, I think that, I mean, that is a fear that we all, I think it's pretty universal, right? A lot of times we're worried about how we're going to be perceived, right? I think that we're worried about, I just was at a talk recently and I was listening to these two presenters and they asked if there were any questions in the audience and my hand went up right away and I didn't get called on right away. And then a few other people asked questions and then the person that was near me, so I probably would have been the next question that would have been asked,
Mhm.
had raised their hand, and this young man had like the most thoughtful, amazing, just I mean it I just I kept my arm down. I was like, oh gosh, that my question is so that my question is so simplistic compared to what this young man is just asked. And so I mean, I kind of censored myself right in that moment because I was worried about that somehow my one question my
Mm,
one question was going to just influence how everyone in the room thought
mm,
about me, that somehow that was going to define me as
mm,
a total person. And it's like, wow, no,
mm,
that is so not the case. So I think that it starts with, and I'm not saying this is easy because like I said, this was like 2 weeks ago I just did that to myself. I I think that we have to, don't let our questions be all that we are, right? Don't give them that much power. So that's a little bit of a mindset shift. And a lot of that has to do with, I mean, that was my own negative self-talk, right?
mhm,
And so, I mean, that's another, I think that it's important to, as we were talking about kind of this whole big question around questions and question asking, is you may have, I mean, I know in my upbringing, I was partially raised by a grandmother who was tremendously loving and incredibly impatient, right? So she wasn't necessarily kind of the most open person to ask questions to. So there was kind of a growing up. I think that there was some influence on me that said, the quality of your question is going to reflect your intelligence or your ability, right?
mhm,
So we have to be careful that our self-talk. And then I think the other thing is, and is that you are asking a question actually is an indication that you're engaged, that you're
Yes.
interested, right? So in some ways it is, regardless of how complex your question is or not complex, but you are indicating to the person or people that you're engaged, like you're present, you're here, you're not just scrolling on your phone or daydreaming about what you're going to have for lunch.
Right.
You're here. So
Right.
let that be, take the weight off of it in terms of how it defines you as a person, and allow it to be seen as
Mhm.
real engagement.
I love that. I love that. So, Kristen, we're talking about curiosity, and here in Transformation Station, we always pause at some point in our podcast to give our listeners an opportunity to stop and reflect. And so, to our leaders,
Mm.
we want to ask ourselves right now, how is our curiosity? Do we have curiosity as we're engaging with our teams? Are we asking thoughtful questions that gives our team members an opportunity to respond to the curiosity, to open them up? Curiosity isn't a sign of not knowing, it's a sign you care enough to keep learning. And so, as Kristen was talking to us about the whole concept of asking stupid questions, there's no stupid question. Your question shows that you care enough about the topic, the situation, the circumstance to keep on learning. You want to be informed. And so then that reminds us that the key is to focus on learning, not performance. Instead of worrying about how your question sounds, focus on what it helps uncover. Kristen, this was a powerful quote for me. And I at times ask myself, when I focus more on what I will uncover, what I will learn, I realize that takes down the degree of stress. It almost like
Mm.
it takes a guard off of what could be holding me back from opening my mouth. Instead of worrying about how I sound, I'm more concerned about getting the information that I need. And Kristen, I think
Yeah.
this is powerful because as leaders, you know, no matter where we are in terms of how long we've been leading, there's like this cycle, right? When you get promoted, you're starting all over again. There's always
Mm-hmm.
something that we have to learn, right? And sometimes there can be that fear factor of being the new one in the room, or being the one in the room that doesn't have the
Oh.
most experience, but we still can ask engaged questions when we focus on the curiosity and use that as our strength. So, Kristen, I want to ask you this question. What's the difference between a question that simply gets an answer and one that opens up real conversation or connection? I really want to hear this answer.
Well, I do think, I mean, if you are, if you find yourself, it kind of depends, right? It depends if there's going to be maybe a different set of questions or some different kind of emphasis if this is a newer relationship or someone that you've just met, right? And versus a more established relationship where you might have some history, and there might have, there's could be baggage, not baggage, but just some history. So
Mhm.
and so I'll say, kind of, I think the universal way to lean into that is, if you are kind of stuck, is ask a question that maybe you would like to be asked, right? I mean, I think that could be a great place, and not necessarily a question that you already have the answer to. I mean, I most of my work now is in small group leadership and workshop facilitation, and it's a lot of question asking and prompts. And a lot of most of what I create, I'm creating it not because I already have the answer to it. It's that I really, that would be a question that I would want to be asked. So I think that is one way that you can start. And I think the other, I was just, a little thought bubble went across my head, so I'm going to have to, it's going to come back to me. But it is, the other thing that's going to open up that question and lead to more of a conversation again is going to be that listening piece. So
Mm,
the companion to asking good questions is being a good listener. So these
mm,
are they're working in tandem, because you really, when you ask a question, give the respondent the attention and really the respect to fully be listening to their answer.
I love that. I love that word. You said give them the respect. Leaders, we're all leaders. We must realize and remember that when we take time to ask questions and to listen, we are showing respect. So we need to ask ourselves, how can we respect our teams, right? And I also thought about this, that a transactional question gets information. A
Mm,
transformational question builds relationship. And so leaders, we want to ask ourselves, as we're looking at our communication styles, as we're looking at growing and asking better questions, ask yourself, are most of my questions transactional? Yes, no. Tell me
yeah.
now. Like this, right? Or are my questions transformational? Am I seeking to build connection, build relationships, strengthen values, right? Do mentoring? But from a leadership perspective, the best leaders know that real influence begins with empathy. And I heard you, Kristan,
Mm,
talking in this vein, right? To stop and to listen, I must be empathetic and not listen to get an answer, which is transactional, but listen to understand. That's
yeah.
where the transformation happens. I've seen with my own team, Kristan, when my staff members when I ask them a question and I look them in the eye, I put everything to the side. I'm not still typing on my computer. I just give
Hmm.
them my gaze, even if I'm super busy, but I give them my gaze, not like, can you hurry up and finish talking, but just
Right, right.
yes. And they know that they have my attention. It makes a difference. Even in terms of, sometimes I see them get nervous when they ask me a question, and I say to myself, okay, what's my effect? Like, was it my tone? Was it the way I'm looking at them? Like, how can I de-stress, de-escalate the situation without even saying a word? And so leaders, we want to say this to you. Ask, how is this decision landing with you? What do you need to feel supported? Kristan, I don't know about you, but I know that many leaders have said they like to stay away from that word feel. They
Mm,
feel like if they use that word feel, now we're getting emotional in the workplace. But no, again, it goes back to empathy, right? Because we're not just collecting information, we're building trust. So on
yeah.
that note, Kristan, we have sometimes in our workspace, depending on what's going on, either in the personal lives or maybe if on the job things are not going too well, people sometimes lose hope. I want to ask you this question. How can we find hope?
Mm. Yes, it is. It is easy to. I think that there is. I want to recognize that losing hope and is a real. It's something that needs to be talked about, and we want to be supportive of each other. And the way that I remain hopeful is, in part, I think that there is, I kind of, I do, I'm doing kind of three things. I'm gonna reflect on my past and recognize kind of how far I've come, right?
Hmm. Yes.
I'm also going to lean into the future a little bit by really welcoming those best case scenarios.
Hmm.
And that's related to the past, because a lot of times things worked out in my past in ways that I never ever could have imagined, right?
Mm.
I have I've got data points that will support this kind of future thinking of that there are best case scenarios out there that I don't have the imagination or the experience to think of. And
Mm.
then probably the thing that, is the most grounding is if I remember to ask myself the question, am I okay right now? Right
Mm.
here, right now. Am I okay? And
Mhm.
usually the answer is yes.
Mhm.
I am okay right here, right now. And so
Mhm.
then I can build on that.
Yes.
I'm a big believer in showing up, just continuing to take one step at a time,
Yes.
and I give myself permission to show up sometimes when I don't feel 100%,
Yes.
because I feel like that. I also know from past reflection, it's that there have been little miracles, if you'll say, or there's been things again that I could not have anticipated, thinking that I was going to have to show up a certain way and being willing just to show up as I am.
I love that. I love that. So, on that thought, let me ask you this. Why do you think that people are more afraid of success than failure?
Because for most people, and this is my own experience too, my lived experience, we have so much more familiarity with failure. I mean, it is something that is known. And when we are talking about success, and I think it's very important to define what success means to you. I think that that is one of these, I call them wallpaper words, one of these words that we use that we're kind of assuming that we have this global understanding of what success means. I think it is a word that is worth you revisiting at different times in your life and saying, this is what success looks like for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so often, again, kind of thinking about those best case scenarios, when we are talking about success, we are talking about the unknown,
And
essentially, in a way. And I think that there is tremendous fear around change and the unknown. I can think about times in my life where I stayed in very uncomfortable and really just not healthy situations, but it was familiar because I was too scared of the what if.
mm,
Um, I think a big way for me to make that shift, both personally and professionally, is I used to do a lot of, okay, what's the worst case scenario, right? Okay, what's the worst case scenario? And boy, you can just, that has a long
mhm.
runway. You can go
Yes.
all the way down. And I mean, at the end of the day, as humans with our kind of fantastic brains that are also these very primitive brains, I mean, the question that we're asking is this going to kill me or not? Right?
Mm,
I mean,
yes.
will I live? Okay. So yeah, you can do the worst case scenario. And I mean, sometimes you have to do that because that's just where your head is at. And but at the same time, be willing to say, okay, what's the best case scenario? Like, and usually, I mean, for myself, and I have a good imagination, but I can get a little bit, I'm like, oh gosh, I don't know. I mean, it could be this, but that doesn't even seem like the best case scenario. And I think about, I mean, it's almost, it opens up this realm of possibility.
Mm, I love that.
And so yeah, and that requires, that's a little bit of a leap. And
Yes.
it's, like I said, I think you can go back enough times in your life and say, did the worst case scenario happen?
Mm,
No. This other thing happened that, boy, I didn't see that coming.
hmm I love that. I love that. And so again, to our leaders, as we are listening to this conversation and discussion with Kristan, we want to ask ourselves some question. The question that we were looking at is, why is it sometimes that we are more afraid of success than failure, right? And Kristan talked to us about the fact that we don't have to be afraid of failure, nor do we have to be afraid of success. There's no fear in leadership. It's having courage and stepping out just one step at a time and learning and growing along the way. Kristan, I found this quote that says, people fear success when they see it as a test. They embrace it, see it as an opportunity to serve. And so leaders, we want to invite you to shift your mindset, empathy, understanding. See this, your leadership, as an opportunity to serve. See asking questions as an opportunity to get informed so you can continue to provide service and value to those who you are leading. So, Kristan, as we turn the corner here on this conversation, right? I know that we have listeners, leaders who are listening right now and watching, and they're saying, okay, I hear you. I am convinced I need to ask better questions. I need to put this into my practice of how I lead and how I live, right? But here's the question that I want to ask you as we turn the corner. In today's world of short attention spans, this is real, right? And social media that constantly keeps us engaged, right? And entertained. How can we as leaders, how can we ask questions that cut through the noise and that makes people feel truly heard?
Well, I'm gonna back it up a little bit, and I'm gonna suggest that you start by taking the time to get to know yourself and really be willing to ask yourself questions and take that pause. And I do that by journaling. I have a journal that I have on my website, and I think that is a great place to start because as the and I think for a couple of things I want to really note that I don't feel like self-discovery is selfish. And going back, I love what you said about serving. And we are all wonderfully unique
Yes.
and different people. And our gifts, so to speak, our talents are when we are not fully realizing those, that that's kind of a disservice, right? So I love the idea of, and it's been so helpful in my own personal journey, and which has then been reflected in my professional journey, is get to know yourself, and at different, and it's a lifelong process because
Yes.
we're always changing and we're at different stages of our lives, but get to know yourself, then you can really be trusting yourself and be coming from a place of integrity and alignment. And I think that goes back to the very first thing I was saying about the whole communication piece of asking questions and that it's not just our words, right? So when you are showing up as someone who has been courageous enough to ask yourself questions and get to know yourself and
Yeah.
show up in integrity right then and there, you are you're modeling
Yes.
a you're modeling a curiosity, you're modeling empathy, and a real openness.
I love that. I love that. Which reminds me of this. When leaders model humility, curiosity, and learning, even at the top, because we're all leaders, we show that success doesn't have to isolate, it can expand. And that will multiply across through our teams. Kristan, this has been such a rich conversation today. I want to thank you for sharing these pearls, these gems of wisdom. And I know that our community is better for it. I know that there are leaders that want to. You mentioned your journal and you mentioned being a business coach, right? I know that there are leaders that want to engage with you. Please tell us, what's the best way to do that?
Well, definitely visit my website, KristanSwan.com, and you can find out all sorts of information. I will put in a plug for Spaghetti on the Wall, my journal. This
Yes.
is, you use it every day. It's 10 minutes a day. It's not something to overthink. I literally recommend that people set a timer for 10 or 15 minutes, and then when the timer goes off, drop your pen and move on.
Wow.
But yeah, come and check out what's happening at KristanSwan.com. And I want to thank you, Adrienne, for creating this incredible space to have really important conversations.
Thank you. It has been wonderful. And Transformation Station, we always like to support our guests. So I want to invite you. You see the website here on the screen. Those of you who are listening, it's also in the description. Please go ahead and check out the resources that Kristan has, as well as let her know that you watched or you listened to this episode. Share with her what resonated with you and ask Kristan some more questions so we can build great question community. Kristan, thank you so much. It's been wonderful to have you with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, there you have it, Transformation Station. Another amazing episode. What a powerful reminder that great conversations don't come from having all the answers. Nope. They come from having the courage to ask better questions. If today's episode made you pause or sparked a question, please share it with us. Leave a comment, send a DM, tag me on social. I want to hear the best question you've ever been asked. Don't forget to follow and subscribe to Transformation Station so you don't miss a Monday or a Wednesday leadership episode. Until next time, keep asking better questions and stay curious.